So for today's coloring page, this is something that I sketched, and it can be actually found in my, I'll put the link below, but it can be found on Etsy or in my shop. But this is one of my coloring pages. So I wanted to show you how to take something that's more cartoony and make it sort of come to life. So let's get started. I think I'll start with the grays. So this feels like it's some sort of gray machine. So I'm going to start with my grays. Like I said before, I usually start with my lightest color, almost always. And this is on cardstock, so I don't have any pages underneath. So this is just my base layer. I'm using neutral gray. Let's see, neutral gray 2. So this is just printed on cardstock. And I know this like barely even looks like a color, but we want it to be a little bit. So I'm actually going to try to make this look like it's a little bit old. So I'll show you what I mean later. So we're going to switch to my brush tip for these finer areas. So I want to kind of make it look like it's maybe rusted or something like that. So you'll see as I get further along what I'm talking about. So this part is just takes a minute to do, and I'll just do the top part so we can switch to another color quicker. All right, I'll do this part too, and then we'll switch to the next color. And we'll worry about the bottom later. So I'm going to set this aside. Yeah, so that barely even looks like a color at this point. So what I'm going to do first, oops, sorry, I hit my camera there. What I'm going to do first is add my darker grays in the back here. Because this won't, I'm not really going to do too much layering in the back color. I might add a little bit of a darker color just to make it look more recessed. But for right now, I'm just going to add that so it pops a little bit. This one is one that I drew on paper and then I sketched digitally, retraced it to make it digital. This one's called Writing Machine. Okay. So now I want to, before I get too deep into things, I want to look at, I'm using this color called Sand. It's an Ohuhu E220, and I'm going to add a couple of little imperfections here, like maybe it's just a little bit rusted around the edges. And you can do this after the next color too, because they're going to be around the same sort of shade, I guess. But I'm going to do it now just because I want to. And that's a good lesson in alcohol markers. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I've got a little bit of rust there. And then I'm going to go in with this neutral gray 5. It's CG050 Ohuhu. Oh, I think that might be actually darker than I wanted at first. So I'm going to pause and grab a lighter color. And I bought the Ohuhu, I have the Ohuhu pastel set, and I've got these cool red grays that I've been wanting to work with, RG110. And so it's got RG 030, 110, and 120. So I'm going to add those in there too, just for a little bit of extra dimension. So that'll be my sort of second layer. And so what I'm doing now is called, I think they call it sharding. So it's where you're just leaving a little bit of that white space in the background for some highlight. Like I don't want it to be perfect. So then I'm going to take the next red color. So that's the RG 120 from the same set, and do the same thing. So this will just add a little bit of extra dimension. So I'm just sort of dabbing lightly. Yeah, I like how that's turning out. So I want to put a little bit of a darker color on this top piece under the where it looks rusted. So I'm going to try and find an orange here that will do the job. So I'm going to use this light orange. This is from my Beliza Suprema set. It's called 140, or the number is 140, light orange. So I'm just going to sort of deepen the edges of the rusty look with a little bit of orange. Don't worry about going outside the lines too much. Just gives it a more artsy feel. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a orangey brown, this potato brown, 103 potato brown. And that will add a little bit of that brown color in there as well. So you can see how doing alcohol marker coloring or art is really about kind of adding layers and not so much about doing the flat sort of coloring. So I like how that's turned out, and then I'm going to go back to the color that I oopsied with. So this is neutral gray CG050 that from the Ohuhu set. I'm going to use my brush tip so that I can just do a little bit of dimension shaping here. I'm just adding kind of like where I think the sort of shadows and recesses would be. Darkening up that under area. I might make these little bolts a darker color, make them stand out a little bit, like that. And then kind of like there's a little bit of a seam there. So you can see how this would be, this is like adding texture where there isn't any. There, I'm pretty happy with that. So then I'm going to move on to the next section, but before I do that, I think I'm going to darken up underneath there just to make it look real nice and dark. And I'll use my CG204 Cool Gray 204, like Roman numerals 2. That's from my Ohuhu set. So I'm just going to darken that up a little bit so it stands out a little bit more. So it looks like it's sort of bolted to an underplating. Then I'll move on to the next section and do a similar effect, but I'm going to try and make it look like they don't, like it's kind of been I don't know, like haphazardly thrown together, like it's a machine that this guy built in his garage, or this person. It's sort of a non-binary character, not female or male, so oops. Sorry, I keep hitting my camera. Okay, so I've already done that color. So I'll go back in with this sort of reddish color, just so that it's like, okay, it's kind of used from the same sort of metal. And I'm gonna go along all of these little bits here, just so that there's something kind of tying it together. And I'm doing it kind of on the edge, so this one I might do on both sides. So sometimes when I'm doing coloring or I'm doing art and I've got my sketch laid out and there's a, you know, I'm ready to start coloring in the design, sometimes I'll do one section like this to decide how I want it to look before I do everything. And I do that because sometimes I'll pick the wrong color and, you know, I'll make a mistake or something. And I want to make sure that I don't carry that mistake over through the whole thing. So I may even actually do this little headpiece thing like this. Okay, he's got the little plate there. All right, and I think I'll do, actually I think I'll do all those in a different color so it looks like kind of separate. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in with my rusty colors. Maybe I'll just do a little bit. The nice thing about rust is that it's kind of random, so you can't really mess this up. Oh man, I'm having trouble with my camera today. I'm going to add some darkness to these bolts here. So I'm making these bolts a little bit darker than up there. And again, don't worry about them being perfect because this is supposed to be like a sort of haphazardly thrown together machine. Just realized I missed this piece here, so I'm going to go in and do that one. And then I think I'll do these a little bit darker in the background. So these are the bits that hold it together. So I'm coloring on cardstock today. I was testing out prints as I was adding digital prints to my store and to my Etsy. And I decided to print them on cardstock to see what they look like. So it looks not too bad. I think I'll do this under piece here too, like this. And maybe that little shadow just while I have it here. And then I think this might be a little too dark for that, so I'm going to go back to my CG 050 Neutral Gray 5. And I'm just going to add a little bit of randomness to this. And then I'm just going to let that sort of live like that. Because I kind of like that look, how it's like when you leave the little white space. And then maybe this piece doesn't even have any rust because it's a newer bit. Except on this one side. I guess it already has rust, so that doesn't make sense. You know what I'm doing. Okay. And then I'll just do the same thing down here. Just add a little bit of character to it. Alright. So let's pull out some colors. I want to do some of these chords. So I sometimes like to do the chords in like primary colors because it gives it a sort of like computery sort of feel. And I'm not going to do a lot of layering on these. I might do a little bit of shading later, but I think just one color is probably sufficient. And I'm using my fine tip. This one is Y3 Barium Yellow. So I'm just trying to see like where they kind of go together. you know, where the wires sort of meet, so that there's some continuity. So that one goes here, kind of twists around. That one goes like that. Yeah, so this one is going down here, that right into there. And I might do a couple of these too. Do this little bulb here. And I'll show you how to make bulbs look a little more brilliant. Okay, then I'm going to go in with a red. So this is my Vivid Red 4 from my Beliza Suprema set. This one's kind of nice because the lines are thick enough that you're, you know, if you have a light touch, you're not going to go over them too much. You're not going to go over the lines too much. So I'm coming back up here to do these ones. I'll do this one over here. I want to make sure I leave enough to do a separate color too, or a different color, I mean. I think that looks pretty good. And then I will go in with a blue. So this one is the Brilliant Blue PB2 from my Ohuhu set. And you don't have to use the exact same colors as me. You do you. I think I messed that up a little bit, so I'm gonna add a little bit of, maybe there's 3 blue cords there. That's fine. You're allowed to make mistakes. Oh, my dog's belly. I think he might be hungry. He hasn't barked, or I don't know if you can even hear that on camera, but his belly just went bro. I have a 17-year-old dog right now, and his appetite's a little bit strange, so this one is saturating really, like it's a really juicy marker because I haven't used it that much. So it's bleeding a little bit, but that's okay. All right, I don't think I missed any there. Okay, so I'm gonna do, see, some people will go like in an order, but I kind of just go to the part that I feel kind of inspired by. So I'm gonna give him a brown jacket. Originally I thought I was going to give him, or give, I'm gonna say them because I don't, it's a kind of a non-binary character. I was gonna give them a, like, you know, the denim tuxedo kind of thing, denim and denim, but I think I'm gonna do a brown jacket. I don't know why I'm feeling brown jacket today, so I'm gonna find a color that I can use for the brown, like the base color. I think I'll use this color, and I'm looking for, I have a color called Sand White that I'm looking for. Eggshell White. I'll use Eggshell White. That'll work. So E090, Eggshell White. I'm using that for the base color. And don't worry about going over these little pens and stuff. I'll probably just leave the skin of this character white. I actually don't, I'm not a big fan of using skin tone markers, to be honest. I'd rather just leave them the way they are, but everybody's different. Okay, so that was Eggshell White. This one is 040 Brown Gray, and that's from my Beliza Suprema set. So I'm just adding a little bit of extra bits. So that under color, like the color I used underneath, is not meant to be the color of the jacket. It's sort of meant to be, you know, where the highlights are being picked up, and it's supposed to add a little bit of extra tone. I gotta move this camera. I keep bonking it with my head. There we go. So we don't really want it to be like perfect. It's sort of meant to be used as like an undertone and for, you know, those highlighted areas, just to give a little bit of extra texture to the things we color. So this is meant to be kind of my shadows, really like kind of in the folds. So I don't know if you noticed, but I use the chisel tip a lot. It's my favorite, and when I do my art, I almost exclusively use chisel tip unless I don't have access to it. So in this case, we're trying to make this person look like, kind of like they're like working, like in a workshop sort of environment. So I'm going to use blue gray. This is from Ohuhu, Beat your MG020 blue gray. Just to do some jeans here. And it did bleed over the line there a little bit, but don't worry. We're gonna make that look just fine in the end because we're gonna use some shading, and again, this person's supposed to look messy, so I'm not really worrying about it too much. So I have some other blue grays here in a different type. I have this blue gray 3 from Bellezza Suprema. This is a cheap Amazon alcohol markers. So I'm going to add a little bit of texture and make it look a little more interesting. And then I've got the next shade darker, which is BG5 blue gray from the same set. So I'm going to use my fine tip, and I'm just going to add a little bit here. These ones like to bleed, it looks like. Bleeding quite a bit on this, so that's okay. Don't you worry your little head. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of hair. Just gonna do brown hair, and then I'll add a little bit of darkness to it. I also want to make this chair look like it's made of wood, so I will use some of my grays. I've got some brown grays, warm grays. So what I'm trying to do here is make it look, ooh, this one's really dry. Make it look as though it's made of some type of wood, like an old, like one of those old man chairs. Kind of for the vision for this one was sort of like someone working in their workshop and they hated writing, so they made themselves a writing machine because they have more technical skills than writing skills. When I was doing this one, drawing it up, I was doing a lot of writing as a copywriter. I still am a copywriter, but that's a story for another day. So when we're doing any sort of like alcohol marker project, so coloring or art or anything like that, process is always going to be messy, and you'll hear me say this repeatedly. It's always messy in the beginning. So, you know, it's bleeding over the lines in some spots, and it's, you know, not looking the way you want it to look. It's like, that's not a reason to stop. You can continue to sort of adjust it. You can hide little mistakes. You can, like even this is a dry marker, but it's wood, so wood has texture, right? So I'm not worried about it being too dry because I can kind of mask that as intentional texture. All right. So then I've got my next shade up, which is the Warm Gray 6. That's a little bit darker, so I'm going to add some texture here. I'm just sort of going with what I think the chair would kind of look like. You know, just little imperfections. You can use this sort of lines as a guide, so maybe I would do just enhance these little lines that are already in the image. And then this would probably be darker because it is on the bottom. And then I would probably lighten that up as the light sort of hits the bottom there. There we go. So then I'm going to use the next shade of these warm grays. So this is the Warm Gray 9. This is my darkest color. So I'm just going to enhance the areas where I think there would be kind of some shading. And we're going to go in and shade this later. But, you know, sometimes I like to add layers and layers and layers and layers. All right, I think that looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. Okay. So now I'm going to add these little pens here. I'll go in later and make those look nicer, and I'm adding a little bit of shadow with this pen just while I'm at it. I'm gonna go up here. Okay, so I want to make these look like they are like a different type of metal than the rest of the metal. So I'm using my Neutral Gray 5. So I'm just giving them a base coat. So in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, you know, these are little bits and pieces of metal parts that this person like threw together. So there, that's the pen piece. So I'm just tracking back to this part. So I'm going to probably make these different shades of colors, but I want them all to kind of look like metal. So I'm doing this underneath this first base layer as a sort of metal base coat. If you're struggling to decide how you want to color one piece of something, even if it's like your art or if it's your coloring, if you're struggling, just go to an area that you know what you want to do, and then as you start coloring, it'll probably come to you. That's usually what I do when I'm not sure. I try to just let it flow, not beat myself up too much about it. And then it'll slowly start coming to you as you color a little bit. So like earlier, I wasn't sure if I wanted this part to look like this part or if I wanted it to be separate. So I just moved on to a different section because I'm like, you know what, I'm not sure right now. So I'm just gonna wait and see. And I color all this in here so that I can give it some good shading after as well. And then all of these little pens and things, so there's pencils and pens and markers and whatnot. I'm going to do those all in different colors. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to go down here, since I have this marker out, and give these little bits kind of a base color. Oh, I think I missed that one. I might even do a little bit of this helmet here. And maybe I'm adding a little bit of shading while I'm at it. Yep, I like it. Okay, and also I'm going to do the boots because I want them to be some type of gray shade. So just getting all my base layers down. All right. So now I'm going to take my darker gray, this one, which I told you in previous videos that this is one of my go-to colors for shading. So I'm going to, this is what I'm going to use for my shading, but I'm thinking if I want this to look a little bit different, I might add a little bit of a blue tone. So I'm going to take one of my blues. This is a pale blue B120 for my Oahu set. I'm just going to add a little bit of detail, just to give it a sort of metal finish. So I'm not going everywhere with this blue. I'm just like, I want it to be sort of like a tinge. You know, like if you looked at it just the right way, you'd have a little bit of a blue effect. So these are warm colors. This is a cool color, so that offers like a kind of a nice contrast. Warm colors are colors that have like red tones, like fire tones in them. And cool colors are the ones that have like icy, like blues and purples. There can be like purples and blues that have warm tones in them, but generally speaking, that's what we're looking at. All right, so now I'm gonna go in and add some shading to that. Yeah, I am gonna use my fine tip because I want a little more control. So in this, I'm assuming that the light is coming from this direction. And I've talked about this in other videos, but if I'm not sure where I think the light's coming from, I almost always think to myself it's on the left because I'm right-handed. So it's easier for me to color this side than all that side. So, or you can imagine the light's coming from this way and you can just shade everything underneath. Which actually, that might be a cool effect because this is like kind of an experiment. Like it looks like it would be in some sort of like Frankenstein workshop. So let's do that instead. So we're going to assume that the light's coming from above. So I'm just going in and all the bits, like if the light's coming from this way, there would be shadows in all these little areas. And I'll be doing this probably over and over again with this color because I sometimes like to just finish up an area because I like to see things done. It's like whenever you're like if you were learning an instrument, you'd want to learn a song instead of just learning, you know, the riffs or whatever. It's the same idea. I like knocking things off the to-do and seeing the finished product. This makes me feel like I'm making some progress. All right, so I'm just adding some little shading as if the light's coming from above. Yeah, this is gonna look good like that. I think we made the right choice. It's a good example of how your ideas can change as you go. I put a little bit of shadow under this. And then I'm going to cast a little bit of a longer shadow here. And then here. So then this would probably be shaded underneath here. This would have a deeper shadow. It's coming from above. This would have a shadow. And I like to bounce around. I know that can be frustrating for some people, but it's just how my brain works. So this, we're going to make it quite dark. I'm going to make this dark here. And then all of these little chords would probably have a shadow from above. This would probably have a shadow there. That's looking pretty good so far. I'm happy with it. So we're just moving down. This would probably have a deeper shadow. And I'll show you how to make these light bulbs look nice and bright. So I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to these chords as if they're casting a shadow. And the thing to remember is that, like, when you're showing people, they don't usually notice your mistakes as much as you notice your mistakes. Like, they might notice something here and there, but they will not notice like you notice. So I'm just adding some shadow in the face to make it look more dramatic. I'll add some shadow here. See how it's sort of starting to look like kind of Frankenstein type idea? And then I go like that. This might even be all in shadow. I'll do like that. And then I'll even add a shadow at the bottom here. So this might even be all shaded in here. We haven't even put any color on this yet, but that would probably be all shaded behind him or them. That's looking pretty good. Okay. Oh yeah, and there'd be a little shadow there. Probably under the eyes. Oh yeah, I like that. That looks good. All right, so I'm going to add some more color. So I want to add some color to the chair, and we're going to finish off some of these, and then we're going to add the final details. So I'm going to take some yellow to do some of these pencils. So this one looks like kind of like a number 2 sort of pencil. And I'm not going to get too detailed with making them too different, but I do want to make them stand out. So I'm going to make some of them look very similar to one another, and then we're going to add different colors to make them stand out from one another. So These ones will have the blue base. And I'm gonna probably deepen some of these shadows as well. Okay, so, and then I'm gonna take my brown to make my pencil look pencil-y. That's the right word. I'm gonna take my, there it is. This is just my shadow color, and add the shade in there. And then I'm gonna add my pink eraser. That's done. Actually, I'm gonna use my pink to give this pen a little detail. And then I'm gonna make the tip of this pen look like that. Add some shading. And maybe I'll add a little green, just to make it look like a weird looking little pen. Like that. I will add some purple to this one. It's just a funky looking pen. And then I take my shading again. Where did I put it? There it is. Do my shadows underneath. Might even do a little shadow down the side here like that. And then I've got this guy right here. I'm going to do this one in full green. And then I will take a different green and make that one stand out a little bit. And then I'll shade it up. And then I just have this one and this one left. Oh, I have that one too. Let's see, what do I got? I've got this one. Make that look a little different. Maybe I'll add a little bit of blue. Okay, I've got this one here. And add some dark blue. And then that one there, I'm gonna make that one look like a pencil as well. And then I'll finish them up with their shading. See how I bounce around? Nothing wrong with that. And then this one would have a little shade there. That one bled a lot, but that's okay. I'm gonna go behind here and add some darker shading. So it's going to muddy it up a little bit, but we're gonna go in and add some even darker shade after this is done to really make it stand out. I just like to have variations in my shading. So there's like the darkest recesses of the shadows. Sometimes I'll shadow something like this completely in one color, and then I'll just go over it completely again in another color because I just don't like how it turned out. Or I don't think it was dark enough, or what have you. So that's okay too. You don't have to worry about picking the wrong color unless you go too dark. And then you can usually still fix it. So, okay, that's looking pretty good. I want to add, I really wanted this to be a sort of red, kind of like a red leather chair. So I'm just pulling out, this is one of my Copic markers. This is like my favorite. It's called Lipstick Natural, but it's one of my favorite tones to use for when I'm doing shades of red, because it makes a really nice like undertone. So like that first layer. So when I'm doing cars, I will use this. So I use white to highlight, and then I'll use this Lipstick Natural as like the first shade of red. So it's one of my favorites, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. Got one right here, so let me pull it out. So this was a really quick This was a 20-minute sketch that I did, and see how I use this Lipstick Natural as my red tone, as one of my first red tones. I really like it because it gives a good mid shade, so it's one of my favorite markers. So then I'm gonna go in with my red, just in the darker spots. Like that. Just to make it look like it's got a little bit of dimension to it. There we go. Okay, that's good. And now I'm just going to go in and finish my darkest shading. Oh, before I do that, I wanted to show you how to do bulbs. So when I do bulbs, sometimes I'll even go like this, where I'll do like a glow around the bulb, like that. And then this is a good example of, this is a Copic marker. This is a good example of a mix between warm or different warm colors. So this is a yellow that has a warm tone. Then I have another marker. This is the lemon yellow. And this is yellow, and this is like almost an orange, but it's still considered yellow. So this is like just an interesting color that I like to use when I'm doing like a warm light bulb color. So I'll do that right in the middle there, and then it looks like there's a really warm tone inside the bulb, and then it's kind of glowing outward. So I really like that mix. So now I'm going to go in with a dark shade. This is also a Copic marker. These are the ones I use for my sketches. I don't usually use them for coloring, but I really wanted to show you how nice these neutral gray, how nice these neutral grays are. This one is getting kind of dry, so I'll have to kind of go easy on it. So I'm going to go in here and make that really dark. Like that. And then I'm going to add the darkness in the deepest recesses. So I don't want to do, I'm not going over the shading that I just did. I'm just deepening those dark areas. So like where the light would be almost completely absent. So like underneath. So like here, probably be like that. So like under the thicker lips of things, you know, like here. So that's gonna give it, and I do this with all my sketches when I'm done. This is the last phase. Any sketch, any coloring, I always add my darkest shading. So I might do some shading as I go and then add the darkest shade, and it just finishes it off really nice. And then my very final step that I do in every sketch is add some highlights with paint pen. So I will do that next. You know what? This bled a lot, but I'm not even going to worry about it because I think it just gives it sort of an arty feel, and I think it looks better that way. I prefer loose things that are loose anyway. Okay, so then like here, this would probably be the darkest spot there. That would probably be dark. Do you see what I'm doing there? Just in the deepest spots. So just underneath, like down here, would probably be real dark. So like under these little things would probably be darkest. This would probably be dark right on that edge. Right underneath would be the darkest, and then it would probably stretch outward. Same here. And then maybe this like little underneath spot. Under here would probably be really dark. Then kind of under these little cords, like that. And like under that one, how it overlaps. Here, how they overlap each other. Like when they're just kind of touching. So right there. And just see the difference between like that and that. It just adds so much more interest to what you're doing. I think it's just so much more interesting than just a flat coloring page. I don't think I have anything else overlapping. Maybe right there. Okay, and then like right here might be a little darker. Right under this thing would be dark. Or these ones. Maybe right at the base of some of these. This would probably be dark under here. It's overlapping. That might be dark. This darkest spot here. Maybe right under the nose, right under the hair. See how that gives it such a more dramatic look? This is, I don't know if you can tell by how quiet I get, but this is my favorite part. This is the part that makes it feel like art and not just coloring. So then I might go like this. There. Maybe there. Under his fingers or their fingers. Maybe like right there. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. All done. So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit so you can see that better. And I'll do a quick, like a slow-mo, so you can see the whole thing. Kind of up closer. I love it. I think it looks amazing. I think I might actually frame this one. That's the nice thing about doing it on cardstock, is you can put it in a frame. I think that looks really good. So actually what I'll do now, now I know you come here for coloring and you don't usually use paint pens, but I'm going to use this, actually this gel pen, Uniball Sino, just to add some extra little highlights, since I have decided I'm probably going to frame this one. So I'm just going in where the light would be, sort of adding that little like blowout, like where it would blow out the color. It'd be so bright that there'd be like kind of a shine spot. And one technique I like to do with these is sort of the dotting. So sometimes you'll have the color that will, or the texture of whatever you're coloring that has, you know, it has some type of like, I don't want to say rough, maybe rough texture, or like it's a little bit different of a texture. So I like to do this sort of dotting. Actually, you know what, I am going to add a little bit more shading because I feel like this would be kind of darker under here. Yeah. That would probably be dark right there. Yeah, oh yeah, that looks way better. Okay. So for instance, like here, these might have a little shiny spots. So when I'm talking about adding the little dots, let me find, when I get down to the clothes, I'll show you what I mean. So see how that just makes it really come to life? So you don't even need a lot of it, and it doesn't even need to be like super accurate, but I think when I do my art, I think this is the part that makes people really love it, because it really brings it to life. Makes it look like it's, you know, more three-dimensional. So I might even do like these little bolts. So a little in the light there too, here. So I can do, I'm getting close to doing that little technique I mentioned a minute ago. So I'll do the hair here. Okay, so like here, I might do like a little bit of dotting, just to make it look like the shirt has some texture to it. Might add a little shine there. Same with there, some little, so it looks like it's not super flat, like there's actually some, you know, ripples, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but, and you can also use this to kind of cover up some of your mistakes too. So this blew out a little bit there, blew out a little bit there, so I could kind of go like that. I do this sometimes on when I'm doing commission art. I'll just kind of go around things. People, nobody's ever said anything to me about it, so I don't think it's a big deal to do that. I don't think anybody even notices, so I know I blew this out over here so you could go like that too. Yeah. So I'll show you the difference now with it. So we'll do a close-up. See how different that looks? I think it looks really good when you add just a tiny bit of highlight. Yeah. So that's it. That's it for your video for today. If there's anything that you'd like to request, feel free to leave comments or, you know, what have you. And I will try to accommodate. So that's it. Have a great day. Bye.